While we all settle in, I'll just tell you a little bit about our three guests today. I'm losing my shoe. Now, Lorna is a vice president at Seqirus, a company formerly known as BioCSL that manufactures, markets and distributes vaccines. Prior to her role there, Lorna showed her entrepreneurial side in setting up Icaria Australia in 2009, a biotherapeutics company that went on to be successfully acquired, I believe. Now, next on our couch is Megan. Megan Baldwin has been the CEO of Opthea since February 2014, which is an ASX-listed biotech company focusing on the development of new therapies for eye disease. And last year, Megan, you were awarded our Emerging Women in Leadership Award. And next on the couch is Shelley, who was appointed as CEO of the Australian Red Cross Blood Service just 10 weeks ago was when you took up your appointment. And Shelley was formerly the Chief Executive at Monash Health for 8.5 years and was also the 2011 Telstra Victorian Businesswoman of the Year. Welcome, ladies, to the couch. Give them a round. So I thought we'd start off just hearing a little bit about your career journeys. Now, Megan, you're a Melbourneian by birth, and you were a locally trained scientist doing your PhD at the Ludwig Institute of Cancer Research, and you've stayed in the same scientific field sort of throughout your career working on angiogenesis. But you've made that transition from bench to business to biotech CEO. Was it a big decision to sort of transition in that way?
Look, I think there's been two key transitional points in my career. The first one was that decision to move away from traditional bench research, which is a decision I made when I was at Genentech in the United States, and that was a key decision for me. But I think it's about really trusting your instincts and knowing where you really want to take your career in the long term and having the confidence to take a big sideways step at times. And I think the second major transitional point for myself in my career was the decision to move away from a larger, well-funded biotechnology company in the US, where the sector is very, very different, as everyone knows, and taking that step to come back to a very early stage company where there's a lot more uncertainty associated with drug development and funding, but yet represents a whole lot of new opportunities for someone who really wants to grow their expertise in various areas. And I think for me, that was a really key decision in allowing me to move away from being recognised as really only just a research scientist that can bring that sort of input into a program, but having the ability then to roll up your sleeves and take on a lot of new challenges that a smaller company can offer you, whereas a larger company cannot.
I guess with taking any risk, there's always has to be opportunity on the other end.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think you do need people that back you. I think you do need to make your own luck in a sense, and you do need to take on things and not have an approach to it where, well, that's not my job and that's not my role. But I think if you're willing to roll up your sleeves and do pretty much everything and whatever needs to be done in the company, then you're going to be better off for it. But having that opportunity is really key, and having mentors and executives that can see your potential as well is equally important.
So, Lorna, your accent is a bit of a giveaway that you're not a local. You've also undertook your PhD and worked in academia in the UK. What drew you to working in industry and to Australia?
Okay, well, I'm not an Australian by birth, but an Australian by choice. Grew up in Glasgow, in Scotland, my BSc, and then came down to London to do my PhD, and then doing research in labs and having really strong collaborations with industry partners, and looking at that time at modulators of neurotransmission in the autonomic nervous system, and working with those partners. And the days that I really loved were when we got together and we looked at the results from the experiments in the lab and how those compounds would translate into medicines in man. And I just got so intrigued by that journey that a compound makes from the test tube into the patient. And as I heard more about it, I felt sure that it was into industry that I wanted to go. And I got the opportunity to move into clinical research with Glaxo in the UK. And it was a golden time of pharmaceuticals, and got to work in clinical trials across Europe with some of the leading physicians in asthma and cardiovascular disease and neurology, and it was really fabulous. And then, but seeing everything that has to come together, all the people working in the lab, in clinical research, regulatory, manufacturing quality, all those people pulling together to bring a product to market. And yet, if the commercialization isn't right at the end of the day, that product can sit on the shelf or be used in the wrong patient. And I was really drawn to that commercialization side. And so within the organization, I went out. I actually was a sales rep in central London and then moved into marketing and have done many roles and really love my job.
It's interesting, when I talk to scientists about careers, they often say, well, I'm interested in industry. And you think, industry is a very diverse place. There's so many different kinds of opportunity. And being able to go into sales and marketing to really drive that commercial edge forwards. Some people have always said to me, I don't think that's for me.
It's the dark side. A lot of my colleagues in academia were horrified when I first suggested I was moving into industry, and then when I had to tell them that I was being taken off to the dark side of sales and marketing, they were horrified. But I do see it as a culmination of everybody's work from the test tube all the way through, and with that comes a huge responsibility. And we put in an enormous amount of time and energy into getting the market research right, the positioning of a product right, the education. And there's nothing more satisfying than when you get a letter from a patient, someone who's been in chronic pain and is treated, or someone who's suffered from asthma and then is living a normal life. And that makes it absolutely worthwhile, and you don't feel like you're working on the dark side.
Absolutely. Now, Shelley, you originally trained as a nurse in New Zealand, rising up through the nursing hierarchy. How did you come to be in Melbourne running hospitals?
So I had an opportunity. We all have days where our jobs don't go as well as other days, and I happened to get a phone call on one of those days that talked about an opportunity in Melbourne. I had thought that it wasn't the right time for me. At that time I had two sons who, one was about to go into the final year of high school, the first year of high school, and one who was about to go in the final year. And as a family, we were sitting down at dinner that night, and I was just recounting that I'd had this phone call. Sounded like an awesome opportunity, but clearly with the age of the boys, it wasn't time to move. And it gave me great insight into you never quite know what your children are really thinking. When my eldest son said, well, actually, Mum, I've been looking online and I'd quite like to go to university in Melbourne.
Oh, that's helpful.
It was helpful. So that actually changed the whole dynamic of the conversation, and I came across to run two of the hospitals in Monash Health, where I ended up being the chief executive, as you say, for the 8.5 years before I moved to the Red Cross.
And so why the move to the Red Cross?
I think one of the things when you're a leader in whatever you do, you need to identify when an organisation needs some refreshment. So for me, I knew that sometime in the next few years I would need to move on, and it didn't mean I wasn't still loving it, and it didn't mean that Monash Health wasn't still doing well. It was. But there becomes a time, and I think part of leadership is actually knowing when it is time for you to move out and for when somebody else can come in to keep moving an organisation forward. And I was very lucky that around the time that I had just started opening myself up to that thought, Jennifer Williams, the previous CEO at the Red Cross Blood Service, had identified that it was time for her to move into something. Now, when I considered whether the Red Cross Blood Service was the right one, I looked at a number of things, and for me, who the chair was a very, very important attractor for me, because for me, I need to work with somebody who I can really respect, but who actually thinks differently than me, because I think it is important that we have diversity in our thinking around the board table. So I'm very lucky, I'm chief executive and I am a board member. So I needed to think about that, but I also needed to ensure that my fit and the organisation's fit were right, and that doesn't mean that we are the same now, but that the leadership style that I could take in and the organisation that it was can actually find some alignment.
I think that's really important, that idea of having diversity of skills around the board table, diversity in its broadest terms. Now let's talk about risks then. Lorna, I heard that you didn't even want to come to Australia. You didn't think you'd like Australia. Was it a risk for you to come out here?
That's only because I had a view of Australia that was neighbours and Sylvania Waters and Skippy. Actually, the Skippy part was quite promising. But having come out here on my travels, I just fell in love with the country, and I fell in love with Melbourne. I just love that mix of new city and old Europe and Asia, and I was completely won over.
And you took a big risk stepping out and starting your own company, or was it founding it in Australia?
Yes, and that was a risk because I was used to working in big pharma and having lots of resources and very defined roles for everyone. And, I think, as you said, when you take on a small company and you start up, and I had a phone and a computer and some seed funding, you have to be a jack of all trades. But I also had the opportunity, I knew fantastically talented people in Melbourne, and I could bring them into my team or use them as consultants. So it was a risky business and a few heart-stopping moments, but a great team and a great technology.
And we keep coming back to that Melbourne ecosystem, kind of that you need successful people throughout the sector in all different roles to really drive the success of companies. It's fantastic. When I talk to people about their career journey, particularly women, and ask them, well, how have you gone through it? They always say to me, oh, I've just been really lucky. And I sometimes find that really frustrating. It's because, are you really lucky, or have you just created your own opportunities? I mean, Megan, it comes back to something that you said earlier about creating your own luck.
I think you have to have that attitude of and confidence really to take on new challenges and not being afraid to fail at them, and realising that no one knows everything and that you need to tap into the networks that are so very important, particularly in smaller companies. You can't pick up the phone like you can in a large pharma and know that there's 10 departments willing and paid to help you. You've really got to build those networks and build those relationships, and that's really critical here in Australia because most of us are in small companies as well.
And doesn't really have a lot to do with luck.
No, I mean the luck thing is, like you said, you need to have people around you willing to give you opportunity, absolutely, and I think we all need to take something away from that, but unless you've got the drive, the passion and that willingness to take on things, you won't create your own luck, which is fundamentally what I think most of our achievements will come down to.
Now, Shelley, you mentioned the importance of the chair of the board as being someone that you can work with. Along the way, we hear in people's careers, we hear a lot about mentoring and role models, and this idea that you can't be what you can't see. Have mentors been important to you, especially at those kind of transition points in your career?
Mentors have been incredibly important to me, and earlier in my career I actually didn't realise when people were sometimes mentoring me. So I think there's the informal and the formal, and what I've learned is how much I get out of learning from others, but you've actually got to open yourself up and show that you actually need that, or sometimes ask for that. So when I've come into this role, I've actually done a skills assessment of what skills I have, but also what skills I need to grow. And I have gone out and actually asked 3 people to actually help mentor me as I come in. And then other people just connect around you. The other thing I'd say about mentors is it's very important to also mentor others, because you keep learning about yourself and learning more and more through mentoring other people, and you learn off your mentees as well. So it's actually looking at that whole dynamic of relationship.
It's really interesting. Often people are told, well, fake it till you make it. But what you're saying is there can actually be some strength in admitting what you don't know, and saying, well, actually, I don't know about this, but this is how I'm going to go about solving that.
Absolutely. I can recall when I was first working in health, when I was first appointed as Director of Nursing. And I moved down from Auckland to Christchurch to do that, and I went down for an interview, and I got told it was about my 4th interview, and I got told then that I had actually got the job. And I can remember sitting on the plane and having, excuse my language, a holy shit moment of thinking, when are they going to work out that I actually can't do this job?
I have those all the time.
And I had to actually open myself up and let others help me. And one of the things I learned very early career is surround yourself with those that are better than you. Actually be confident in putting really good people around you. You don't have to be the one to do everything. You're the one to connect them and bring them together and look together how much more you can give. And you have to open those vulnerabilities up. And I learnt that even further later. It was actually when I was in Australia, and I went through a very traumatic death of a partner. And what I had to learn was how to open up and be vulnerable to actually let others help me in a whole lot of ways so I could actually be my best self. And I wish I had have learnt that many years ago.
In terms of your journey, Megan, have you found formal mentoring or informal mentoring has been useful for you?
I've really only ever been involved in the informal mentoring. For me, it's really important to have that connection with people, I think, so that you are willing to open up and be honest and to, I guess, recognise where you have gaps and where you can proactively seek out those people that can assist you along the way. But for me, I think it is a real key part of that is having that relationship that then sort of morphs into a mentoring situation. That has been much more valuable, but like Shelley, I think the earlier you do that in your career, the better off that you are, because it is such a critical part of a career journey. And perhaps formal mentoring is a great way to get started on that path of mentoring and recognising how important it is. So
Lorna, your experience of being with a large company, was there more formal mentoring involved there?
Yes, well, I was what was called a bubble up candidate. Which
Bubble up?
Bubble up, sort of gives you an impression of the bath. But no, it was the company had a formal...
This is with GSK?
This was with GSK. And so I was the bubble up. And they reached down a few levels into the company and had young... And I think at that time there was a focus on bringing women up. And you were invited along to all the senior leadership development days. You had access to senior leaders to be your mentor. And that was fantastic for me at that stage. And actually, I'm doing note to self. We need to look at doing that at CSL a bit more. Whereas now, I have that confidence, and I would agree with my two women on the couch in that I now have that, I can let down and say, I can't do everything, I'm not good at that, and pick people within CSL who can help me, but also more and more looking outside of CSL, because as you, I don't need to get more technical in my job. What I need to get better at is leadership and the softer skills, and that can be learned from every industry. And so one of my mentors at the moment is a senior leader of a very big private school in Melbourne, and she's dealing with huge leadership issues, with staff, with pupils, and she is an incredible woman, and I use her as my mentor.
I think that reaching outside the sector thing is really important. I know that there's a Women in Science Parkville Precinct initiative that's actually getting women from the banking industry to mentor women in the science and research sector. And I think that you can learn so much from those different professional environments when you do get some perspective, I guess, from the outside. Now, I wanted to ask you about advice. I mean, as part of the role of a mentor, you would expect that you would give advice, but often, and I found out this when I became a parent, I got to listen to all the advice other people gave me, but then just basically did whatever I wanted. Because frankly, sometimes advice from other people can be a bit hit and miss. But what I wanted to ask the three of you, and this is a question that I'd actually all like you to maybe talk about over dessert, is what advice would you give your former self at 3 different ages? So I want everyone in the audience to think of their answer. What advice would you give yourself at age 18, so just when you're finishing high school, at age 30, when you're really starting to think about your career, and to the you of 12 months ago? So I'm thinking back to myself, sitting here in your hall last year. What advice would you give yourself? Lorna, let's start with you. What advice would you give yourself at age 18?
Okay, I'm smiling because I have an 18-year-old daughter, and I can just imagine her rolling her eyes and glazing over. And I'm sure that's how I would have responded to advice. What would I say to myself? I'd say have confidence, Lorna. Sit up proud and speak out. I would say look at every opportunity, every work opportunity, every part-time job that you do. Everything, look at the opportunity, see how you can learn and grow from it, and be open to change, be adaptable. So I think those would be my words to myself, but I'm not sure I would listen.
Shelley, what about you? What advice would you give to your 30-year-old self if you could step back to last year or the year before?
Thank you so much. And I'm just reflecting, 2 of my children are almost 30. My advice would be very much the same, but I think the difference is that I'd be starting to open myself up to listening to that. I would very much focus on confidence, because I think my 30-year-old self was nowhere near my 50-year-old self. I would actually tell myself to have courage. I would tell myself to ensure that I always align myself with an organisation with the very best of values and core values in the moment. I would tell myself about how important people are, and that even though I wasn't always confident in those situations, actually most people aren't. And so it's okay to actually not feel that confidence, it's what you do about it. And it would be, you don't have to have every answer, you only need a few, and you can actually find those answers as you go. So believe in yourself and take yourself forward.
Oh, that's fantastic advice for anyone at any age. Megan, what about you? What would you tell the you of 12 months ago? Because it's been a big 12 months for Opthia.
I'd just say relax, dude, because just stop worrying about everything so much. I think in this sector, as Jackie alluded to earlier, there's this tall poppy syndrome, and people want to pull you down. Stop thinking about what other people are thinking. Put your head down and go forward and try to achieve what you need to achieve. I think stop worrying about what other people are thinking, and from that, it's this general theme of have the confidence to do what you think is the right path forward. And so that's the same advice that I constantly try to wake up with every day now. It might have been the advice I gave myself 12 months ago, but it's still a journey that I'm on trying to achieve. So that's it, confidence, and don't worry about what other people are thinking all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what do you ladies have such incredibly high-charged careers? What is it that you do to relax? And I wanted to look in a little bit more to things that maybe aren't in your official bios. Lorna, I hear that you're quite into painting and drawing. Is that true? Fine arts?
Yes, it is true. I hardly ever have the time for it now, but I do love painting and drawing. I find it not that I'm very good.
Have you ever exhibited?
I have been part of a group exhibition because I went to some life drawing classes and we exhibited as a group, and I even sold a drawing to my family.
Brilliant. Yeah. Now, Megan, a little bird told me, and I don't know if this is the case, you're an expert cake decorator. Who told me that? I heard that you do a mean R2-D2. Is that true?
I do a mean R2-D2. That was a hard one.
Yeah. Is this how you kind of channel your energies when you're not focusing on all things angiogenesis and ophthalmology?
I have to admit it's sort of it's gone by the wayside since being made CEO. I have to admit. But I used to do a lot of wedding cakes, and then I had 2 small children, and I take a lot of pleasure in doing a very unique birthday cake according to the cartoon character or whatever's cool for the year. And I would spend months and months and months doing that. So it's a labour of love. I'll never make any money out of it. But it is a creative outlet, I think. And it's for me, it was a very relaxing focal point that I could take my mind away from work.
So what was your most recent creation?
That's a good question. I'm just trying to think.
I'll come back to you on that.
I've done a good Lightning McQueen at one
Lightning
point.
McQueen. And Shelley, I've heard that maybe this wasn't maybe one of your top skills, but you tried your hand at abseiling. Is that true?
I did. You have been doing your homework.
I haven't. I have little birds everywhere.
Many years ago, I was in a leadership role of leading within nursing middle managers. And one of the things we did to develop confidence was we went and we abseiled. And it was one of the most powerful moments for me because, number one, I'm scared of heights. But I was actually leading this and I had to feign it. That was really hard, and I had to feel the fear and do it anyway. And I had to jump off the edge and abseil down with these women behind me that really honestly did not believe in themselves. And the tears and the celebrations when people had done it, because we actually all learned how to push through barriers. It was a truly inspiring moment.
Oh, I'm quite scared of heights too. I'm not sure you'd catch me going down a cliff. Now, final question to end. What is it that you are just getting started on, to stick with our theme for today? Let's go, Lorna from the end.
Okay, so just getting started, the CSL theme, I just love it. It's got an energy to it. I've been really fortunate to have an expanded role within Seqirus, which is it's the vaccines division of CSL, and that is to develop the commercial strategy for Asia Pacific. We have a very good and strong business here in Australia and New Zealand, but really we only have a toehold in the Asian markets. For me, that's just so exciting, and to get to work with my colleagues in R&D, medical affairs, regulatory, business development, bringing that all together to create, hopefully, a long-term, healthy, successful business for Seqirus in Asia is really, I can't wait to get started.
Fantastic. Shelley, what about you? What's just getting started? Obviously at the Red Cross.
So Red Cross Blood for me is just getting started. It's an organisation that is truly inspirational. We actually are giving life improvements through the power of humanity. And to be working in that field with so many inspirational people with a strategic plan that talks about being at the leading edge. So for me, it is leading that amazing organisation to the next part of the journey. It's picking up the inspiration that is within the organisation. It's bringing some new ones in, and it's about partnering. And for us, for me, any organisation needs incredibly strong partners where we can take that organisation through research, through what we do, through modelling, through everything that we do, through partnering with CSL and some products that we work on together. That's just beginning, and it's going to be a fantastic journey forward.
Fantastic. And Megan, what's just getting started?
Yeah, so I think over the last 12 to 18 months, Opthea has achieved a lot of near-term corporate objectives. We've had a lot of restructuring and a lot of refocusing of the company's activities. And really what we're just getting started on is really our clinical outcomes from our trials, and we're really excited about having moved through that preclinical phase, and now we're eagerly anticipating readouts from clinical trials and really growing the company for its next stage of growth. And that's not only within the Australian local sector, but also thinking about how we can do that best in the US and also in Europe. So it's a strategy for growth.
Fantastic, going global. Thank you all. Would you please join me with thanking our guests on the couch today?